All right, welcome back to another podcast episode where we help junior developers grow and aspiring developers get jobs. With me today, I have Scott, Trevor, and Mike, all VPs of Engineering, to kind of just dive into the topic of developer retention. To be honest with you, I think a lot of developers hopping positions too quickly. I think developer retention low developer retention has kind of become a norm. And I kind of want to go into this podcast episode explaining, well, first of all, like giving newer developers realistic expectations of kind of what it's like to be on a developer team and what they should expect. And also diving into, what can we do to start keeping quality software engineers on developer teams. So we'll actually do our normal intros. Scott, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Sure. Scott Ferguson, VP of Engineering at Numerator in Chicago. I've been here about 12 years, and I've been managing and building teams for most of that time, probably 10 of those 12 years, building engineering teams of all sizes.
Cool. And I actually worked for Scott for my first developer position at a healthcare company. So it's good to have you back. Trevor.
Hey, I'm Trevor Austin. I'm the VP of Engineering at Hologram here in town. Prior to working at Hologram, I was at Civis Analytics, and before that, I was remote at Palantir.
Cool. Thank you. And Mike?
Yeah. Hey, guys. I'm Mike Cruz, currently VP of Engineering at CMG, Capital Markets Gateway. Before that, I was at SwipeSense, a health tech company, and before that at Trunk Club. I've been in Chicago in the startup scene for quite some time now. So good to see everybody again. It's a small world.
Small town.
So wait, all three of you, Trevor, I actually don't know your company, but I thought I looked it up and it was a startup. All three of you kind of focused on startups right now?
Mm-hmm. I'm not. After my health tech trek that I shared with you, I kind of decided to get out of the startup world. So I'm in more of the private equity.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Sounds good. Wait, what is the size of Numerator?
I want to say 2,500 today globally, and engineering is 200 plus. It's like 205 or something like that.
Gotcha. That's a lot larger than I thought. Okay. All right. Very cool. So yeah, like I said, I have no idea how to start this conversation, so we're just going to dive into it. So I kind of just want to get your personal, I want you to kind of check me on this. Do you feel like software retention is a problem in general? Do you feel like a lot of developers are hopping on, or in your experience, do you feel like a lot of developers are staying at on your teams at different companies for, a good while?
I'll kick off because I think I kind of have two different perspectives on this. When I have a junior level engineer join, I usually look at that person as this is the start of your 18 months, and we're going to lose you after 18 months. And go back to the conversation, Don, you and I had when I first hopped on here, of constantly having side projects, constantly, working on your technical skills and exercising that. That's an important part of developing yourself professionally. And I'm of the opinion, although I don't like it as a manager, but I am of the opinion that it is good for junior level engineers to jump around and start to feel things out as they get a footing in their career. That being said, I do have junior level engineers where you see that timer start and you just start to figure out, okay, how are we going to keep this person happy and engaged? Because I don't really want to lose them to that. There's a lot of potential here and we can grow this person. And it's neither good nor bad, what bucket a person falls into. But I am a firm believer that to some extent, somebody leaving to go find something else is actually a good thing for the individual.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the advantage we've had in startups is that as startups grow quickly, they give you a lot of different experiences, both within your role and opportunities to move around. So it does change. It does feel sometimes like a different company as you go through these different phases. So several of the startups I've been at, people have stayed around because it feels like a different company every couple of years. So you do still get those new experiences, which has been beneficial. I actually think in Chicago, and maybe I just have my set of experiences, but I don't really feel like we have a retention problem necessarily. I can't speak for other cities, But I do feel like in Chicago, at least if we sell people on the why, they join for the right reasons, and the company is growing in a way that gives them new experiences, it's less about stagnation. I do agree, though. I think as an engineer, as you're developing yourself, part of the thing you should watch out for is if you ever start to stagnate or fall into a comfortable place, you should figure out what you're doing or what your manager's doing or what's happening to make sure you're not going to be in there for too long.
Yeah, I'd echo that. There's certainly early in your career, especially, you want to stay like on the steep part of the learning curve. Make sure you're always, picking up new skills. That's where I want to be as a manager as well. Like at some place that's going to be growing quickly, which they say growth is the thing that cures all your other problems, or at least makes them go away for a little while. And I've also had Mike's experience where as long as you're, if you're doubling headcount every 18 to 24 months, it's going to feel like it's a new company. People are going to be taking on new challenges all the time. I haven't worked somewhere before at like numerator size where, it's larger, it's more established. There's less just like ferment all the time, both on the upside and on the downside too, right? I've also worked at places where, we had my startup and we grew headcount super fast, and then it blew up and it went to zero. And, that nobody had a tenure that was all that long because the company ceased to exist.
I will say, though, that some of the best learnings happen on the way, as in the contraction versus in the expansion, because you don't know necessarily why you're successful as you grow, but you definitely know what worked and didn't work as you contract and as you try to delay the inevitable. So I do think that's some of the best experiences that I've had as well, is when I've been a part of teams that have shrunk down. You have to do twice the work with half the people and all the tightening your belt and making sure things work out. I've found my best learnings to happen in those experiences. So,
trial by fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like especially earlier in your career, I think it makes sense to, like, if you're deciding between two places, pick from the place that's smaller or that's growing faster. Like, roll the dice more early on, because it can be harder to roll the dice later for like life stage reasons. And to the extent you're going to learn more early, that's just going to compound over the course of your career. So it's more, if you're going to have a time of concentrated learning, you would rather have that be at the front and then be compounding on it over the rest of your career, rather than playing it safe early on and then trying to catch up later. It's just naturally going to be a lot harder.
I talk to a lot of candidates that are coming from that position of, well, the company's changed a ton. It's now no longer the same company. I've been there 5 years and I'm just looking for something more stable. Like, it's the kind of the exit of what you're talking about, Trevor. Like, now looking to get to that next thing and just sort of stay put, and it's kind of safer, which is sort of the benefit of private equity, is it's a bit more sturdy. But we definitely see a lot of those types of people. Far fewer very entry-level people coming through on the software engineering side of my world.
Yeah, this startup scene ages you very quickly. I think we can all attest to that. And I do feel like there's not that it's necessarily less stressful in a place like Numerator. It's a different kind of stress. But I do think that taking a couple tours through startups, then changing things up by going somewhere, to your point, that has more of a structure and is more durable, I think it's a good way to keep things having different experiences.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're encouraging developers to explore all of their options and basically kind of lean towards the trajectory that's going to grow them the fastest, right? And give them that challenge that they need. So one question I have is, a lot of developers that go into startup positions, I think startups more so than larger companies, a lot of them, a lot that I talk to, actually quit. And I think it's a talk that they should have had with their manager, but they quit because they feel this imposter syndrome. They feel like they're not contributing. They're not growing as fast as like the perceived expectation of what they should have been growing. Because I feel like I talked to a lot of developers that kind of went through even just a year being a software engineer, and they just feel like they don't belong there because, and maybe that's kind of, I don't know, Scott, if that's what you were really talking about, but maybe that's kind of where they move to a position that's a little less hard. So I'm under the impression that I think every software engineer should have a challenge ahead of them, especially in their initial years. It's going to help them grow. It's going to keep them hungry to grow as a software engineer and give them a realistic expectation of really how little they know and how much they can learn and grow from this industry. But like, how do you keep someone from panicking? How do you keep someone's confidence up that is kind of in a startup environment that is difficult, that, a lot's thrown at you in a startup environment? How do you keep their confidence up?
Yeah, I can start with that. I do think imposter syndrome, I think we all feel it from time to time wherever we go. And, so I would say this is our job to create safe spaces so people can be honest with how they feel and can ask for help. And I think, so I would put that on us as leaders to build organizations that create these mechanisms and these environments where you can say, I don't know. And I would encourage anyone that comes into a startup to start on that foot, to say, I don't know, a couple of times, just to get it out of your system, just to like day one, just open yourself up to learning. Because part of saying I don't know is allowing you to grow. And so I would just, I think there's two sides to it. So as the person, everyone feels this imposter syndrome from time to time. So acknowledging that you feel that way and other people do as well. And second is just opening yourself up, making yourself vulnerable, and making sure that your manager has your back in that regard. And other people hopefully follow suit and say, well, actually, I don't know either. You'd be surprised how many things we hold constant, we just assume is true. And we haven't actually, when you actually dig into, well, why does that really work? I sort of forgot. I'll look it up, but I think that's part of just understanding everyone goes through this as well.
Yeah, the biggest separator between a senior engineer and a more junior one is the senior knows how to look up things that they don't know. They're like, oh, this is a thing I don't know, but I deal with things I don't know all the time. But I know how to check. I know how to figure it out. I'll go read the docs. I'll go read the blogs. I'll go read the specs. I'll go look for working examples. That's the biggest thing. So like my message for your listeners is, if you find yourself in this position, don't quit because it's hard. Like, it's supposed to be hard. That's how you're learning. If it's feeling easy, that's when you're stagnating. That's when you gotta like start looking somewhere else. But if you feel like it's too hard and you need to quit, I should tell you, you shouldn't quit, but it's not your fault that you feel that way. It's your manager's fault that you feel that way. They should be creating the kind of environment that Mike was talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, building on that too, sort of the meta side of senior engineers versus more junior engineers is, I'm struggling to come up with a better word other than maturity, but it's that confidence of having been in, understanding their role, knowing why they're struggling, and being able to have the open and frank conversation with your manager. Because I mean, as managers, we've all experienced this where you just simply don't realize how somebody's feeling, and all of a sudden they might drop a bomb on you, right? You try to stay ahead of that, but sometimes it happens. But I always kind of encourage my engineers to, like, if you want to quit, tell me. Like, we'll talk about it, if you're unhappy, if we can't make you happy, I will help you find a new job. Like, we'll be happier in the end. We can find a timeline that, works for everybody. I can help you network. And it helps me, backfill who you are, backfill your role. But it's really, really hard to have those types of conversations with junior level engineers, because it's not, I remember my first boss who taught me that. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, but I was pretty far into my career. And I was like, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. Like, if you could just be that honest with somebody, like, so much anxiety goes away, right? All the anxiety I've ever had about quitting a job, like, I think if I had that opening. But it takes a lot to get there. And so you need to have the right manager, which not everybody's fortunate to have. But then you also do need to have that confidence that you can have that kind of conversation. On the flip side, there may be a role within the company that's good for you. Or there may be programs that the company might offer that works for you. It's, startups are going to be, to Mike's point, you're going to have a lot of roles you can jump around into. That typically is how that's going to manifest. More mid-sized, like a company like Numerator, we have like a lot of training programs that are set up by HR, and so we can set those types of programs up for people as well if they feel like they're a fish out of water. And you do also have some of those opportunities to shuffle people around and find what's comfortable with. There are options to help somebody in place that can extend that 18-month timeline that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people underrate is how big of an investment the company has already made in you just to get you in the door. And you don't experience that as a junior until you do a lot of interviewing and you realize like how painful interviewing is for the company as much as it is for and like no one sheds any tears for us, right? Because we're in the power seat there. But like it's a lot of time and effort to identify qualified people, to convince them to come and join. Like the company, by the time you're in the door, is like really invested in you. I don't think I've ever worked anywhere where they're like, no, we're like trying to get rid of you. Except when, when things go terribly wrong. But then, you'll know, and they'll be getting rid of a whole bunch of people all at once. It won't be like onesie twosie by making your life miserable. That's just like that's not how it goes.
And go ahead.
I think just to go back to the point of, if you feel this way before you quit, make sure you've asked for help and you've opened yourself up to basically admitting that you can grow, but you're challenged. Because if you don't, you're going to have the same problem wherever else you go. And part of it is just you understanding that this is something partly on you, partly on us to create that space. But it's never it will follow you if you don't get in front of it now. So
I like that you made a point, because like a lot of people do carry those habits over into new positions, and they thought it was going to be, the grass is greener over there, but same problems start creeping up because they never actually tackled them. I like that. Yeah, that's a really good point. And Trevor, you had mentioned like companies, someone in your position, you've already invested tons into the person once they actually start that first day. And I almost feel like a lot of new like entry-level positions especially, but like I know when I went into it, I thought I could be fired, like just like that. And I was scared of that because it was my first developer job, and I'm like, I don't want to screw up. I remember Scott just like setting up my environment. I honestly, Analyte Health, you guys did a really good job of that, because I felt like I didn't have this anxiety hanging over too much. Like it definitely would pop up once in a while, but even like, what if I don't set up my environment correctly? Like, did they not test me well enough? Like, I'm not really comfortable with the command line. Shoot, I don't want to show them this. I remember all these thoughts like racing through my head, and I laugh at it now, but like everyone feels like this. At least like a lot of the junior developers that I mentor and that come on, all these thoughts keep running through their head, even like 2 years into their career. It's like they never really tackled the patterns that are invoking this anxiety, and it's almost like they keep repeating it company to company as they hop. So maybe, I'd really like that you mentioned it's important to realize there's a lot of investment towards the employee, a lot more than you probably realize. And maybe that gives people confidence.
Probably as... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
We're probably as scared that you're going to quit as you are that you're going to get fired. So I do think that there's probably more opportunity for us to just be open with each other. But I do, when I think about hiring new people, that is my biggest concern, like to Scott's point as well. Like the 18-month journey is an expensive one on our end if it becomes 10 months or 4 months, because that's 3 months to find someone and all this other stuff.
I mean, selfishly, 18 months is way too short, right? Like I want 3 years at a minimum. Yeah. And hopefully we're creating a kind of place that's going to happen. And ideally I want, like, we'll see. I want you to be there as long as I'm there, and I want to stay there as long as we keep growing, and I want us to keep growing. So, let's just ride that train.
And one of my CEOs mentioned at a developer position that as far as engineers go, if an engineer quits within the first year, the company made a mistake. If they quit after the first year, then it's kind of your choice to do that. It was pretty much like black and white statement, which I didn't fully agree with, but it was interesting that I think that's kind of what sprouted my interest in like retention. It got me looking into it, because I don't think, I don't know, all of you have different experiences. I don't think every CTO or VP of engineering thinks the way you guys do. And a lot of people kind of expect you to leave within a year. It's kind of a weird thing to have in our industry, isn't it?
Unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds about that, right? In my organizations, I want people to be lifers, right? I haven't found a place yet where I can be, but I, would love to just, settle down and stay there. And so when I bring people on, I think anybody leaving that you weren't trying to fire is a loss, no matter how long they've been there, right? If they've been there a long time and they're still doing good, you want them to stay. Like I want 100% retention. That's the goal that we set internally at Hologram. So I don't think, a year and you're done. The other side of that, though, is it's probably actually good for the industry if people cycle, and good for like the Chicago tech scene if there's more rotations of people and ideas. I'm from California, and I often look with envy over there where they don't enforce non-competes. There is a stronger culture of people hopping from one position to another, so in directly between competitors, and you get a better spread of knowledge, a better spread of best practices. It's probably better for the ecosystem if people last 2 years on average and then jump from one place to another. And I've actually found in Chicago the talent pool is there, but the liquidity in the talent pool is a lot lower. People tend to find a job that they like and settle in and stay there for, Scott said he's been at the same place for 12 years. That's,
You're 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Chicago for 12 years.
Oh, okay. Chicago for, I was going to say that's most of my career. Okay. Well, anyway, I find that. And so if you're looking for, senior talent, there's a lot of folks out there that have been in the same place 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they're not going anywhere. So, selfishly as a manager, that's what I want. And then also selfishly as a hiring manager, I wish people would hop jobs more.
It's kind of this strife that we have as managers, though, right? I just did a quick tally here because I'm trying to think this through. I have 5 people right now that we're having active conversations with that are around retention, just trying to make them happy. You can have you move over here. We're going to swing you into this team over there. 2 of those people are on borrowed time for that 18-month time frame, right? It's really a never-ending investment into those individuals. And that's why it is painful. After that 18-month period, you really don't want to lose a person at that point if they're really, really good, particularly. But you are kind of fighting the uphill battle where, maybe to your point, Don, a lot of it comes from imposter syndrome where you see it, or maybe it's other people who are just looking for a different change in scenery. But it's a constant struggle, and that's part of what we do, is trying to keep people engaged, but you can't force that. And if a person wants to leave, you need to let them leave. And that is an important thing that took me a while to learn.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in that, and that's what I was going to touch on as well. Is in my startups, they go through stages, and there are different experiences at each stage for engineers. And I found that some engineers aren't looking for that maturity stage, and they'll stay because you sold them on the dream and they're passionate about the team, but they're ultimately not happy. And I think part of it is having those honest conversations. Look, as a company, this is what this next year or 2 of the journey is going to look like. I feel like you have an affinity over here. Let's help figure out what you do next. And, basically I've had these conversations, which I think are healthy ones, that just help them understand how they feel, and separating out how the passion you have for the company from the passion you have for your job or your career. Because I'm a firm believer in, because it is a small community, we'll run into each other again. And I think our jobs are to create talent for the long term. And if they would better grow at Numerator, for example, than Trunk Club, then I'm going to push them into that direction, because I know that's going to help all of us at the end. So, yeah, I think to your point, we should never try to get them to stay past where their passion ends, or even if they're too passionate but can't separate themselves from understanding where their career needs to go next, helping them understand that as well.
And so kind of diving further into whether a developer, quite frankly, whether it's worth investing more time into a developer that might not stay. And Scott, you had mentioned that 18-month mark. That's kind of a point that you use where after that 18-month mark, you really, really want them to stay. What do you guys think about counteroffers? When someone brings up, hey, I just got I got an offer at another company, but I want to stay. I need my salary increased. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
So we're in an odd spot for this. We do full pay transparency at Hologram. We do like a buffer style formula. So we don't negotiate. We don't negotiate on the front end. We don't negotiate on the back end. So it's like, well, if you got a better offer, I better, that's a data point in my spreadsheet for where the market is. But it wouldn't, we're not going to do like a one-on-one thing, which, I think is really valuable. I've had that conversation before that, like, I think I should be paid more, and they'd be like, look, here's what the formula says. This is how we do things. If it's a real sticking point for you, you might be a better fit somewhere else. So I don't know. I haven't been somewhere before that did aggressive, like, counter offering. I've always been somewhere that's like, well, if they went and got the offer in the first place, they're more out the door than you think.
That's where I kind of sit, and I almost feel like I can understand your first like 2 or 3 years of a job. That's where your head's going to go, and that's where you might think the approach is. But in reality, I think it's kind of poor form because you're basically threatening the employer to a certain extent. It really should be preceded by, and this is what I was saying earlier, that it's just that growth and that maturity that you gain just from existing and having a job for a number of years, and you gain confidence and comfort in that you have those conversations with your manager. The worst possible thing that I think you can do to to hurt the reputation, to Mike's point, we like to network with people all the time, right? And we like to help people get to different shops and sometimes bring them back. It's not going to be a great thing if you're sneaking up on hey, I got more money, pay me more or I'm out of here, right? If I didn't see it coming. But if I knew you were unhappy for a long time and I knew I was struggling to keep you there, I saw that coming, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair to say on the front end, hey, I'm not making as much as I want. And I'm talking to my friends in the industry and I feel like they're making more than me. What can we do, manager, you and I, to like, what do I need to show you so that we could get that number higher? Because it's going to take, it's going to take 3 months, 6 months sometimes to get approvals going, have that happen on the up and up, versus just like, an ambush with an ultimatum. Now, like, if you really are underpaid by a whole lot, then like, and you don't think that that's going to be, that's going to be received well, then you probably should just go out and get the other job and take it. And I wouldn't even, come back and say, I'm going somewhere else for more money. I would and I've done this, right, where I went somewhere else because we had kids and I needed to make more money. But the answer was like, well, I've been here for a long time. It's time for a change of pace, a different size. Like you can talk about the other things that are motivating the move. And not, they said like, they didn't offer, but if they had, could we pay you more to get you to stay? Be like, no, I've already made up my mind.
Yeah, I think to that point, there's this interesting article called Shields Down, which basically says that by the time you come to have this conversation around a counteroffer or whatever, is probably 6 months after the time you decided this company is not for you, because you decided when you first decided to talk to the recruiter, to go through the interview process. Like, these are all moments where you could have then said, no, I actually am happy, or I want to talk to my boss about whatever challenge I'm struggling with. And so there's, I think we all have a rubric that we evaluate every so often in our job around, are we happy? And if we're not, that rubric ever changes, the score ever changes, then you go talk, you have that conversation. So for me, if you come to me and say, I need more money because this is the other offer I'm considering, what I heard is 6 months ago, you decided this wasn't a fit for you. We didn't talk about it then, so it's not worth negotiating now. If instead you come to me and say, look, I don't have a clear path for growth. I don't know how to continue to, rise at this organization or perform, that's a healthy, constructive conversation. When it's about money, I feel like we're past the point of something that we can fix, or it's going to be about money in 6 months again. So I think being honest to Trevor's point, being honest about why you ultimately are looking or what caused you to initially take that first call, that's something we can fix. If it's past that point, too far past that point, it's hard to fix it for the long term.
Yeah, I think that's is that the Rands and Repose, like Michael Lopp's blog from? Yeah, that's a lot of great wisdom on there, including on the manager side. I tell new managers all the time to read his it's like The Vent and the Explosion, or something like about holding effective one-on-ones.
Mm.
But I would disagree with that a little bit in the, I think it's okay sometimes for it to be like just about pay. You know, people have families, people have responsibilities, people trying to buy houses or support relatives. Like sometimes you just like, you can wind up in a place like you could, where you're like, look, I'm growing and my compensation isn't growing to match that. And you can wind up like actually just underpaid by a large amount in the industry and be like, look, I love this job. I love the people. I love the mission, but like, I can't be making 30% less than I could across the street. You know, it's just like not responsible as a professional. I don't think anyone should go and just like, you know, auction your services off and say, whoever's, you know, if you're going to be 1% more in company B than company A, then I'm going to go there no matter what. Right. But I do think that's a valid thing to be considering, especially, you know, in Chicago, the market is smaller. And so it is less competitive. You know, I think there's a lot more salary parity actually in the Bay and in New York, but there's a bigger base of firms and they're competing more viciously for talent and they're, you know, sort of like all checking over each other's shoulders. In a smaller market, it's easier for people to say, well, it's a smaller market. We're not going to pay the market rates and then just kind of like drift along and not even pay to the local market if you're not paying attention.
No, it's a good point. What we try to do is tie salaries to bands and to ladder levels so that the conversations look at, maybe this is what you were alluding to before, it's a 3 to 6 month process is if you need more money, let's help you get to that next level faster.
Yeah. Because
that's the trigger rather than it being an arbitrary, constantly a subjective one-off decision around how much should we pay this person because he's priced himself at X, the market's priced him at X or whatever.
Yeah.
Having the ladder is kind of the key there, right? And I almost have like begun to use the rent the runway matrix as a crutch, where every org I've been with for the last 3 or 4, you got something that's very similar to it, but it works phenomenally well. When you have to have that conversation, it's just sit down with the person. Okay, plot yourself out. They're always going to be on that curve. Where do we need to lower the curve so that you're, you know, moving up and we can start to realign with the salary band. Or the rare occasion, you know, it might just be something where you actually do need to adjust their comp, and it sometimes that does work out in that favor. But more often than not, it usually just spurs that conversation, and it continues to build that trust with the manager, and sort of helps to prevent the coming in one day and you got more money, I'm out of here. You know,
right?
So, I think you guys made up you pretty much echoed a lot of what other tech leaders echo is when people, and Mike, I like that you said it, when people bring up that offer, bring it up to you and expect you to counter it, when they've pretty much been considering leaving and moving on to the next position for about 6 months. And I think it's healthy to take that into account. But so, and you also brought up like the different levels. And that's kind of, I think it's a really good solution. As a software engineer, I love seeing the next step that I need to aim for and having like tangible things that I can do to achieve that. But I do wish some smaller startups would adopt that, because there are a lot of startups that don't have those clear expectations of what it's going to take to kind of move up in seniority and take on more responsibility. And I just hearing horror stories, I think even newer startups could really look into that to retain some engineers, that especially like smaller startups where the engineers have tons of context around the code base. Sometimes they built it and it matters to try to keep them with that. So salary is, it's an option, and sometimes it is like a top priority. Trevor, as you mentioned, everyone has different circumstances in life. Let's say salary was kind of a higher priority, but it wasn't, you know, like a really high salary wasn't a requirement. They didn't have a relative to take care of. Like if they were kind of offered a fair salary for the position that they're considering, like what are some of the main things they should be looking for in general to really kind of strengthen their growth? But what kind of things should you judge managers on? Like what should you look out for? What should you hold you guys accountable for? And what kind of questions should they be asking for in interviews, where like hopefully they ask the right questions, they're going to find the right fit and find the right company to stay at longer? What kind of questions should they be asking you guys?
tough one. How to interview your prospective manager. I mean, it's hard to interview managers. I don't like hiring managers in. I like to promote them internally because it's just like, as the grand manager, like, it's just, I don't know. It's hard because the answers are so, if you know what to say, then you can say it regardless of whether or not you do it. You want to be optimizing for growth as a young person, or like as a person who's new in your career, right? So you want to be asking them, what are the programs? What am I going to learn? What opportunities for responsibility am I going to get to take on? You're probably going to hear more of that from your would-be peers in the organization than from the manager, right? You want to ask someone who's been there a year or two, what's the stuff that you've got to work on? What's the stuff that you've learned? What's the thing that this place does better than anywhere else? That kind of thing. It's hard to get. Someone who's halfway savvy is going to say, oh yeah, absolutely. You're going to learn a ton here at Widget Code.
Right.
There's the never-ending debate about, like, why do I have to do whiteboard interviews? And because otherwise you struggle with that. I think it's a great point, right? Like, it is challenging to do that. I do think you can pressure test a little bit with a manager. Manager's job is to let you do your job. Like, if you're not able to do your job, then your manager's failing. And like, in various capacities, whether you're not able to do it because you're unhappy, you're not able to do it because you can't support your family or and it's seller related, or because some product manager is not getting you something you need, right? I think it is good to, if you have scenarios that you can poke at or role play with that individual of how they would respond in this particular situation, to at least feel out, can you, to Trevor's point, that you're getting the scripted response, you're getting something that's really genuine and kind of based in reality. But it is pretty challenging to do. And that's why we like whiteboards.
Yeah. Yeah. I would ask,
I don't like whiteboards.
If I was interviewing my manager, I would ask, who was the last person you promoted and why, to make sure that there's a path for promotion, is a clear, there's and it's happening, right? Rather than it just being lip service, so actual examples. And then I'd ask, how do you handle disagreements? Give me an example, some disagreement that happened and what was the result? So I think that goes creating the safe space. So can I grow here, and can I be honest and open with myself? And then the rest of the stuff is, I think there's like specific programs that we need to put in place, whether it's mentorship or coaching or professional development. Just like that stuff, it should just be more like checklists that they exist. But I do think, that knowing that you can grow, knowing that you can disagree, but you're supported in a place that allows for that kind of disagree and commit environment, I think those hopefully help make you feel good about the place.
Especially if the managers are the ones who have to disagree and commit. I love to ask candidates, and I think this would be a good thing for managers too. Like, senior candidates, what's a time where there's a technical decision that like didn't go the way that you initially wanted, but that it turned out that was the right decision? Because the manager should have lots and lots of examples of like, oh, they picked this framework and it's not my favorite, but like turns out they're super productive in it. And if the manager's answer is like, yeah, I don't know, it seems like we always seem to make like the right technical decision on the merits, then you're like,
right.
Everyone is just doing the thing that you want with your whims.
There's a lot of value.
Yeah, you don't have.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
As you can say, there's a lot of value in somebody who can like point the camera back at themselves and talk about all their mistakes that they've made. That's going to be a really good answer, right? The person who's just like, oh, it's generally it's all good. That's not the response.
Huge red flag.
And I do think, to that point about having these moments where your team can disagree, is hiring people that have strong opinions and being able to work them to this like these agreements, like get them to disagree, but get them to commit and move forward. If you have this monoculture where everyone just agrees or doesn't, or is passive aggressively ignoring the real opportunity and just all agree with the one person that speaks the loudest, like these are symptoms, I think, of a bigger problem with the culture, whether it's an implicit power structure that's not explicit and people can exploit and take advantage of that, or it is this passive aggressive culture where no one wants to be accountable or push the architecture forward.
I think, Scott, I feel like Analyte Health, one thing I didn't get out of Danny that you were very blunt with was kind of the problems that you guys were experiencing. And I think it is, I don't know. I don't know why some managers do it, but a lot of managers, because I've been in quite a few interviews, and a lot of managers want to paint it as this perfect picture. And I love your advice that that should be a yellow flag for many reasons. But I love it's so refreshing. Just like you want candidates that probably aren't going to spit out rehearsed answers and responses. You want genuine responses. It's refreshing when a manager says, "Oh, screwed up the other day. Actually, last week we just made this mistake." I love it's so refreshing. I think a lot of developers do. Oh, we lost someone. He'll probably be back. But I think a lot of I lost my train of thought. I think, anyways, yeah, it's really refreshing to hear kind of managers say that, and I think it's what attracts me personally to a lot of companies. But I actually, hopefully, he comes back because I do want to ask Mike this as well. It's connecting. I'm going to wait for him to connect. This is a really good question. You're fine. All right. So now that you actually mentioned whiteboard interviews, this is going to be a bonus question. Why do you do them? What do you look for?
You don't.
I know you don't, Trevor.
We do more than whiteboard questions, actually. So part of this is that with Numerator, the company that I joined 2 years ago was not Numerator. It was a company called InfoScout that was acquired by another company, and we rebranded, but the engineering organization from InfoScout is what is now Numerator. And so we evolved from InfoScout, which was a Bay Area company. And Trevor's point, Bay Area is a bit more aggressive in how you do your hiring. So we had a morphed version of that. What we have found is, there is no 100% always great interview process. It just doesn't exist. There's always going to be something. I guarantee we miss up plenty of good candidates. But we do usually one tech screen, and then there's usually one longer one that is on-site, and then usually discussing with a panel of engineers and product managers, kind of a good mix. That piece is sort of a way to do a little technical exploration, but also to the point of the imposter questions where this was great. There's no problem with that. Those kinds of things. We'll try to poke holes and try to understand, hey, can you, how receptive are you to feedback, and how do you work with other people? But when it comes down to the raw whiteboard, I've always just found that if an individual has the basics of core comp sci fundamentals, and I realize this is, the boot camp world, it glosses some of these in some cases. In other cases, I've seen people that grasp a lot of that. But generally, developers that have a good, sound understanding of the fundamentals are a safer bet when you have that longer path. Eventually, an engineer is going to have to stop and think about the fact that an array is contiguous and an array list will resize itself, right? Array is contiguous and fixed point, and an array list is going to resize itself. That's not the kind of thing you're going to learn necessarily in your first junior level job. Like comp sci graduate, which is a baseline. We hire plenty of bootcamp grads, but as a baseline, that kind of gets you a few steps ahead. And so we use the whiteboards to test the very basics of that. We don't ask you to draw out a red black tree, like anything like that. Real simple data structures, and just sort of diving into that and teasing it. And in general, our whiteboard sessions, we will be transparent to your point earlier. This is meant to take longer than the hour that we have. You will not finish this. This is just about us having some time to talk and work through something. And I'm just going to keep going with it, and we'll just see where it goes. And we try to make it as comfortable as possible for the person too, because we realize that it is totally nerve-wracking. I've been in 1,000 of them. I hate it. We get the candidates hate it, but we do have very good output from it. And so when you go through that screening process, And Mike was right. Like, it's like 3-4 months before you can hire an engineer, especially seniors, which could take even longer. You have a lot of people going through that process. And so the funnel, that piece of the funnel, and anybody that gets through the next phase, and who gets through the final rounds, if you didn't do well at this initial screen, we very, very rarely ever have success in the next phase. And so that success rate is why we stick with it.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of that. I think actually, let Mike go first, because if you may do something.
No. Yeah. So we don't do whiteboards. I've done them in the past and a couple jobs ago. We try to do auditions, take home auditions, and then build on that through the in-person interview process. I will say, I agree the fundamentals are hard to catch in the take-home exercise and even in the audition review and all the kind of scrutiny you apply there. And I think that is something that I've noticed I've done this a couple places. It's something you have to catch up on. Someone can get through the process to a hire without having some of the CS underpinning, but have passed the interview process with flying colors because they can build a system, they can architect a system. And I do think that's something I haven't yet figured out how to close the gap on. But on the other side, and this, I think you've alleviated some of the stress, but I've found the whiteboard tests in the past have not allowed people to show their strengths if they're nervous or if they're confused or they're just having a bad day. And I think that I've fallen on the side of I'd rather not miss understanding how you would work day to day on a real problem that we're going through, for the chance that I might filter out people that don't have the CS fundamentals that hopefully we can train for, or hopefully they're honest about wanting to learn when they come in the door.
It's the number one thing that I'll go back to recruiting with if I'm passing on a candidate, and I'll say, I think this may have been nerves, but I just didn't see it. But the person was clearly so nervous, and I could not, sometimes it just doesn't work and you can't get them in the zone, or it's just difficult with that person. And that's where I think we probably have the highest miss rate of what you're referring to. We're in a different environment. They may have done better. That's the trade-off.
Yeah, I do think it is a trade-off. So like, I'm not testing as much for CS fundamentals. I think you want some of that on the team so that when it matters, like whether something is, contiguous or dynamically allocated, you have the occasional person who can like issue spot that, but I don't know that you need 100% coverage on the team of that. And a lot of the fundamentals is just, if it's just knowledge, you can backfill it. If it's problem solving, you kind of can't. And I also want to maximize my signal on the problem solving. I actually, maybe atypically for an engineer, like I love doing whiteboard interviews. Like I'm a big guy, I'm a recovering attorney. I met my wife doing musical theater. So like I love to perform. Like I'm totally comfortable getting up there and doing the thing. But
you're the one.
But most people are. Yeah, exactly. And there's enough of me going around the industry. And I've had some really great hires that I know just from knowing them and working with them, like would not have done well put on the spot like that.
Yeah.
And so we do the same thing as Mike. We do a take-home exercise and then a pair programming extension on top of it via Zoom. I do think it's important. Like we want to put that technical screen. That's your great filter, right? Your answer to the Drake equation is like, why aren't all the engineers working here? And it's like, well, because you have to pass this thing first. So you want to put it early in the process because you don't want to spend a lot of time on that. And it's okay if the pass rate is really low. Like the technical exercise should be hard. It doesn't, you want to make it like not nerve wracking, but you still want it to be, you want there to be a high bar. And our biggest challenge has been making sure that you can get a high bar without requiring a super high time commitment. We've recently rolled new take-home exercises that I think strike a better balance of this. But for a while, we had a take-home that gave us like really great signal, but that like, more than half of candidates would just like not complete because they would look at it and be like, this is going to take me 6 to 8 hours minimum. And like, I'm not prepared to invest that much at this stage. And so that's the hard part. That's the other part of the trade-off is you are going to miss people who are time constrained doing the take-home thing. And it's really hard to get something that both like gives you a strong signal, but also like isn't going to take, if someone spends 20 hours on something, you can really tell if they're a good engineer, but no one can spend 20 hours on, more than one or two jobs, and people don't interview at one or two places and they shouldn't, so.
Yeah,
I do think this is
good.
Yeah, we've been trying to. We've gone back and forth on the time commitment. We've forced a 4-hour max limit, but I do think it reduces some of the signal you can get. But it is interesting to see what trade-offs people make when they do that. But it also normalizes the bar for past applicants, because we had people take 15 to 20 hours on the assignment. And it looks amazing, but it's not fair to compare that person's assignment to someone that followed the rules and took the 4 hours and made those hard choices to test first and to not finish the functionality, but have what work perfectly. But I do struggle with that too. Is I think I don't want to ever ask people to have to commit more than 4 hours to this audition, because people have lives, and those people we want, and I don't want to exclude them. So I do wonder how many we're missing on that, just having an audition at all.
The trade-offs though also are, they get like the best part of pulling it in, right? Because we only give 2 hours for ours, right? After that phone screen, as you go to that next stage. And part of like what we're going to talk about is, why did you do it this way? What would you have done better? Like, you only had so much time to do this. Like, how would you do it in hindsight 2020, right? And implemented this way. And a lot of times, I was just kind of rushing through this, and so I just kind of crammed it in there. Okay, cool. Like, why doesn't this work that well, right? And you can have a really good discussion with somebody, which is a very good way to dive into how they're thinking and understanding how they solve that problem.
I wish more developers would enjoy the whiteboard interviews in particular, because a lot of people, it's just such a controversial topic, and I don't know. I suck at data structures and algorithms. I'm just like, every time I think about it, every time I go into an interview, I get really nervous. But I don't practice them. I don't. But like all the qualities, like you guys had mentioned, there are trade-offs, but all the qualities that you are looking for, like, I feel like people just go into those interviews with the wrong idea of what like you're looking for. I feel like they're judging you're judging based on their technical capabilities, and that's what like starts bringing that anxiety, and they don't realize like you're just looking at the interaction. How do they solve the problem? Like Scott, like you mentioned, like you don't expect them to solve it. Like they're supposed to fail at this. Like how do you?
Well, it's not expected to fail, right? Okay. There's a certain level of success that you look for. The technical screens that I've been giving for probably 10 years now, and I bounce between two because I get really bored. Both of them have multiple layers that I'll just kind of pull back on, because one candidate might blow through this in 10 minutes and then your average candidate takes 50. That's just kind of how I approach it, so that we can get through certain pieces. But, like I said, I tend to be looking for the fundamentals. And so there's a certain line there where it's like, all right, we're going to get this far. It's probably not going to go ahead. But then as we start to get into the meat of the problem, we start to think through things, then it gets to be really interesting. This is sort of like the hit or miss of, you can have a lot of fun with a candidate, and you can both be riffing back and forth on the problem solving and thinking through it, and they get excited, or they get incredibly nervous, and it could go south, and you might end up missing on somebody who may have been capable of it. We definitely don't encourage outright failure, but mistakes are good. Debugging is good. I think one of the, I don't want to say worst thing or a bad thing, but it's not a necessary thing, at least if you're interviewing with me, that you go through and make sure that it's completely bug free, right? I use CoderPad for all my interviews. You can run the code right there. I don't care if it runs. I'm happy to just talk through it. But some candidates will get hyper obsessed with, okay, I got to make sure I wrote a test case for this, and I didn't capitalize that. I'm like, it's fine. It's really just about, can you talk through the problem? I've seen this problem 1,000 times. I know what we're trying to get to. Is that a level of success? And yeah, maybe it doesn't compile, but I get what you're getting to. Let's move on to the next piece, right? And what's that conversation that we're having as we solve that problem, as we do make progress?
So Scott, how do you scale this like humanist process that you're describing to an organization of 250 engineers? Like, what does your scoring rubric look like? How do you train interviewers to be able to do what you're describing?
The people doing the screens is a smaller subset than the people who are going to be in the broader panels that are going to be that larger project. The panels, we will pull people in. Usually when you're like a senior level engineer, we'll start to pull folks in. And it's a delicate balance of, you don't want like 30 people in the room. I remember when I did it, when I joined the company, they actually put me through that. And there was like a lot of people there in the room. And then on the TV in San Francisco, there's a lot of people there as well. We try to avoid that. But you find that right number, hopefully get one person in there, let them see a bunch of these and they start to learn. And then we do have a rubric that here's what entry level people will tend to do. And here's how they tend to solve it. It's not 100% of the time true, but like 60% of the time it's true. And sometimes you get surprised. Here's what a mid-level is going to do. Here's what a senior level is going to do. And so it's a little bit finger in the wind, but in general, we see a lot of patterns after you've been through a number of these, and we start to have the questions that are asked, the things people are digging into, the things people are spotting. They start to learn from that of just being the experience of being with the other engineers.
All right, thanks for sharing that. Seriously, that was definitely a bonus question I wasn't expecting to ask, but I definitely want to hear your answers with that. So with this next one, I want you to gloat and don't like hold back. What qualities about you do you feel like, maybe not just like qualities about you, but what did you push hard for on your engineering teams? Would you push hard for at your company to like really to encourage people to stay and want to stay and grow at your company? Like what are like a few top qualities that you implemented, like a few top qualities about yourself and a few like maybe a couple things that you implemented on your teams to keep strong, good quality engineers on your teams that like you would not go back on?
I could start. I think transparency is one of them, Don. You noted it when you and I worked together. I didn't realize how transparent I was back then. But I have a habit of, if you're a senior level engineer in my team, somebody I really trust, you're one of my managers or something like that, I get a real salty email, I might just forward it off to somebody just so they can see what's going on, right? These are the things that are happening. It's just a FYI for transparency, no response needed kind of a thing. I just find it builds trust. Right. And trust is the key thing. You want to be able to have good conversations with your engineers. If you're not having good conversations, that's when people will leave. Or it's at least when they leave when you're not expecting it. I think it is important for organizations, though, and this is too, I think we've all made this point tonight. Career ladders are important. It's harder to establish them in startups. Or you can establish them and it can be harder, at least in my experience, it was always harder to stick to them because you're changing so much. I lost my train of thought. I had a third one there, but
it's all right. It'll come back, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for me, the place that keeps me engaged, and the thing that I push the hardest on for us to keep up is having a lot of autonomy. So I say, this is a startup. I'm a startup person. The reason you join startups is because you want to work someplace with fewer rules, with more blurred lines around responsibility, with roles that are just naturally going to grow because there's more stuff to do over time. So I want our organization to be a kind of thing that over delegates, if anything, right? That's why I want to have really strong answers to that. When's the time that someone picked a framework that you wouldn't have picked and it turned out okay, right? You should be giving away all the marbles in the famous blog post description. And I want people, so I want that environment because I want to get the responsibility and I want to be able to hand things off. And then I want people who also want that. So they want to get things, they want it to grow, they want to see how much they can wind up taking ownership of. Because there are people who kind of just like, they want to stay heads down. You give them a stack of tickets, you pull it off the top, you punch it out, you put the next one on. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to look up from my desk. And like, I'm not going to work well with that person and they're not going to be a good fit on our team. And I kind of want to have like an opinionated skew in the organization that says, we want people from all walks of life, but we do want you to like want to own things, want to learn things, want to take on responsibility. There's not room for, because I hate being micromanaged, and almost as much I hate having to be a micromanager. So that's the big thing for me. And if we're aligned on that, that's going to be my super hard pitch for why you should stay, with Hologram, why you should stay with me, because we're going to keep doing that. You're going to keep growing. I think that's going to be the thing that is going to maximize someone's growth over the long term.
Yeah, I agree. So I've got 3 cultural values that carried with me wherever I go, and I try to fit them into whatever the company that I'm going into, whatever set of values they have as well. Teacher, learner, being entrepreneurial, and focusing on impact. And I think creating a place that where people want to learn, humble enough to admit they need to learn, and excited enough to and have in depth of knowledge around something so much so they want to teach. So that's one. If you want to be a part of that, then obviously, to Trevor's point, I want to work with you. The entrepreneurialism is also to the point about I don't want to micromanage or be micromanaged, and I want to hire people that can connect to the why, that know how a business works more than just how the platform works, and works diligently to help make the business work better. I always say my boss, I'm not your boss. The customer is all of our bosses, and so at the end of the day, if you want to connect the work you do to the person that's using the solution you built, that's the environment we want to create. And then this thing about impact is, again, our work never stops at a PR, never stops at a merge commit. It's all the way, carrying it all the way through to production. It's seeing whether it actually worked or not, and then iterating on that. And again, that connection to making the impact is important. So I think if we can create this culture that gives you the autonomy, gives you the responsibility, and gives you a platform to learn and teach, then stay for that. Right? And then, of course, stay for the mission of the company. I think at the end of the day, I'm a window into what the company wants to do and where it wants to go. And our job is to sell the why and figure out how we can continue to keep that front of mind. So yeah, that culture I want to be a part of, and I want other people to get excited about.
How do you get your engineers to get a little bit closer to the customer and stay more involved with the business?
It's a good question. It's varied for me as I've moved between industries. But at the end of the day, we have this one-on-one program wherever I go, where day 1 or week 1, you do the jobs of everyone else in the companies. You handle the support requests, you go on a sales call, you look at the product, you do the different jobs so you can understand and empathize with, even internally, how the different groups work. And then ideally, the best case is you're your own customer. So Trunk Club a couple of jobs ago was really easy because we were all of our own customers. We're actually the best customers for the company. And that was an easy sell because I just let them use it. In health tech, it became a little more challenging, but ultimately it's going on user interviews and going into the field and connecting. And I think it's up us investing the time and letting the engineers do that pays dividends, right? Because then they connect, and then they make a mental connection to that person. They have a muse that they build for. I think that's how we build great things.
I've had a lot of success with this. I think I could think at least 3 times in the last year that we've crafted roles for individuals who wanted that relationship. So Numerator's kind of unique. I think we have 2 UI engineers in the entire company. Like, we're a data company. It's mostly backend. So by nature, you are not close to the customer at all. Usually several degrees separated. But we have found areas where for certain individuals, we could craft a role that allowed that person to get that exposure if it was the right fit. That may be fitting into the mold of like an engineering management role, but blending a little bit of the product management and allowing them to lead that piece. That's for a very senior level person or an entry level person who came in and they wanted to have direct interfacing with the client and wanted to be able to take that back to a back-end team that, again, was several degrees separated, but wanted to be able to pull that feedback. And so the role we crafted for that person was a relationship with a product manager who does voice of customer work and sits down and talks to customers and finds out what they want. What are they complaining about, right? It doesn't always work, but we try to. We just try to be as flexible as possible in that way and within reason, because that's not going to work in every case. And it's certainly not going to work across a super large organization.
Yeah, I think the thing that Scott said there that I want to pick up on is you want to, this is where you need to lean on your peers in other like departments in the organization, right? You want to lean on the UX research team, on the product management team, and make sure that they're doing like evangelizing the understanding of the customer in a way that you want. Because like having every engineer go along on customer calls. Like you can do that early on, but it's not going to scale with the company going. Like there's a reason that product management it's like a distinct role and a distinct discipline. But you want, like, I have my peer in the product management organization, and I need to have a really close relationship with them so that I make sure that their output is coming through richly to my team. I need to make sure my team is sort of like ready to receive those insights as they come in, and not treat them as just like, here's a spec that you got to fill out, but like, hey, y'all, we need to actually read the user story and try to imagine who's the person who's doing this. Or, we're not going to go on every interview, but they all get recorded. We're going to pick out one and like that we curate and we watch that really, well illustrates stuff.
Okay. All right. We're a little short on time, so I appreciate you guys answering that. I have one more question for you. We have about 4 minutes, but working from home, we have a pandemic. How has that affected you guys? How's it going across your engineering teams?
Yeah.
What's that?
So who wants to start with that?
Yeah, so I'll go. We had a pretty strong remote culture before the pandemic started. My boss, our CTO, lives in upstate New York and comes to Chicago for a couple days, a couple times a month. And we had some full-time remote folks already. We were already kind of a hybrid team. So we had a lot of the infrastructure in place for people to spin out and just do everything fully remote or remote first. Now the office is open a little tiny bit. I actually haven't been back yet. So, you lean heavily on Slack. All the meetings are on Zoom. You need to do a lot more writing than you would otherwise to make sure that you're, broadcasting information, because you can't just say it out loud in the room. But we had pretty good muscle memory around that. I mean, honestly, for me, the hard thing about working from home is like, I miss being able to like go to a coffee shop. I miss having a place where I could go and work, and like my kids are not in the house. Like that, the bigger thing for the pandemic is that the schools are closed than that the office is.
I got lucky in that regard, because while I'm not in my basement, I am off of my garage. And so my kids actually don't come through here. So I get them running up above me and everything, but I've escaped that. We got a new office. We were supposed to move into the Macy's building back in June, to July due to some of the delays. It's a gorgeous new office. It's semi-open. People can go to it, but nobody's really going. It was a similar experience to what you had, Trevor, where we used Slack already. We were pretty accustomed to that. We use Zoom a lot. We were already accustomed to that. We're an international company, right? We're hubbed out in Chicago, San Francisco, Ottawa, 2 different hubs out in India. So we're used to remote communication. But aside from, I would say I had a couple of employees who they're itching to go back because of problems like what you're talking about, where like I'll see his kids running through his office all the time, but my engineers, and I just feel bad for him, but the situation he's in, right? I need just to be accommodating. But we do quarterly eNPS scores as a whole company. And I had 85% of respondents in my latest eNPS survey say that they would prefer to continue working from home most of the time. And so, we didn't, through luck or whatever, we managed to operationally bridge the early stages of the pandemic when everything had to go remote. And we have a lot of manual operators in our company. But we were also able to just sort of maintain velocity on everything that we were delivering within the product and engineering organizations. And how we've settled organically appears to have just worked. People generally seem to be very happy with it.
Yeah, I've come in an interesting time. So I've been at my current company. I started March 30th. So in the pandemic, I started in the lockdown. So I've only met, of the 40 people in my company, I've met 4 of them in person. So I don't know how tall anyone is actually. Like all I've seen is literally this view of everybody. And we've also hired, I'm sure you as well have, several people through the pandemic. So they've only ever seen anyone through a square on a screen. And so I'm in this position where I now have to create trust completely digitally. I've never broken bread with almost anyone that reports to me or I work with. And I do think this is my biggest challenge, is I think I've had to be overly open, overly exposed to be able to let this channel work and create that connection that would have been nonverbal and all this other stuff in person. And it is very intentional. Like you guys said, the tools that you choose, how you work, So my team has four different offices around the globe. And interestingly enough, I think this push to fully distributed has made us work better together. So there's partially distributed, fully distributed, or co-located. And we were sort of co-located, so we're partially distributed. So there was always this tension because which office gets the nucleus of like ideas, and how do you? There were definitely silos across the offices. And now that everyone's remote, everyone now is on the same page. So there's no water cooler talk in Seattle. That's not happening in Chicago. No, I forgot to include you in this meeting. And I think that's actually helped us be more cohesive as a whole team. So this is worked to our advantage. I think what's worked to our disadvantage is that I actually don't know culturally how connected people feel. I do struggle with this in general, just not having had those connections. How I continue. I look forward to the end of all this so we can get back to some of this relationship. But I do think that a fully distributed model has forced us to work in the channels that allow us to scale and work on the same, like on a level playing field. There's no silos of information or no missed conversation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think that we really leaned on to make the hybrid model work was we would have very frequent offsites. Quarterly, we would bring everyone out to Chicago and we'd spend the full day like doing a light programming exercise, but then like a team building thing and then a programming and then more team building and then go out to dinner afterwards. And that you could like get a whole lot of that team gelling stuff for remote folks. So you could have, I'm a big believer that, we could go back to fully distributed and it would be okay. But that you can't do even that now. Like there's like,
Right.
co-located, hybrid, fully distributed, pandemic, where like we can't even have, the in-person team building. And that hopefully we can get out of here relatively soon. I'm totally confident we could make this work. I don't know how long we can stay up here, and just like all the connections are 100% over Zoom. It does seem like something important is missing.
I have an offsite next week. I know what you mean. It's gonna be 2 hours on a Zoom call. But Mike, it's interesting you say that about like the silos going, like, because that's exactly what's happened with us, where India, because of time zones, obviously stays a little bit separated. I have an engineer out in Australia too, and he tends to stay kind of separated. But we have pockets within Ottawa and Chicago specifically where you have the bulk of our engineering now. And we started to actually bring people into some of those same teams where they used to be more co-located. And to your point, like Chicago was kind of a nexus for a certain part of our business, and Ottawa was a certain nexus for another part of our business. And we might help one another with the interview processes or the panels that I referred to earlier. But in general, you were still helping the Ottawa team hire their person, and they were helping us hire our person, or San Francisco, what it might be. But these days, a lot of that's gone away, really for the better. We have a lot more flexibility with what we can do. People are happier.
Yeah, what hasn't worked for us has been Zoom happy hours. 20 people trying to talk at the same time is a hot mess. So I don't know if you guys have found a way to recreate the happy hour experience digitally. We've not figured that out.
One of my engineers, he had like a party games thing that he was able to fire up into Hangouts. And that was amusing. We were drinking too though, so it could have been.
There was a successful Among Us game night.
I like that.
That went really well. Because that is, relies on some team building stuff in addition to just like, we're running around the racetrack or something.
I invited a lot of people to that. That was not team building. Are you sure? Okay, that's pretty cool though. I really like that. All right, so first time ever, I went over. I am sorry about that. We do got to wrap it up just to give you the rest of your Fridays, but I appreciate you diving into that last question. So I know you probably get a lot of messages, a lot of people wanting to join your company. So what I usually say is let's kind of do our outros. How can people connect with you? If you don't want to put yourself out there, I completely understand. I'm sure your inboxes are flooded. You could just say goodbye. You could do your outros. You could say, hey, I'm on LinkedIn, whatever you guys want. It's completely reasonable. But I'll actually go ahead and start. So I am pretty much doubling down on these podcast episodes. I'm going to be doing a lot more of them. And pretty much if you want to see more of these, let me know in the comments, or even just kind of reach out to me any way you want. Let me know what kind of who you want me to bring on, what episodes you want to see. That's pretty much what influences I think I pretty much have the next 4 weeks filled of what I'm going to be doing. So yeah, let me know. Definitely like, subscribe, share it. Brand new podcast. Please share this. I'm definitely trying to grow it. But if you want to reach out to me, probably look me up on LinkedIn, Don Hansen, on Twitter, Developer Don TV. That's pretty much it. How about you, Scott?
Yeah. So Numerator is hiring. You can feel free to reach out to me. We hire Python developers primarily. As I mentioned before, we're a data company. We move around a lot of data, and that's primarily what we do. But Python engineers, we have a number of roles on our website on numerator.com for some other parts of our stack that might not fit into that bucket. You can find me on LinkedIn, Scott Ferguson. Feel free to reach out.
Cool. How about you, Trevor?
I'm Trevor Austin on LinkedIn. You can find us at hologram.io/careers. We're growing fast, and we'll be hiring for the foreseeable future. Yeah, those are the best ways to get in touch with me.
Yeah, and for me, Mike Cruz at LinkedIn. So CMG Capital Markets Gateway is hiring. Again, we're a financial services company trying to help companies raise money through the IPO and capital raising process. So we have a lot to grow. We're expanding internationally next year. So definitely people that in the .NET and Rails space that have a bent towards working in high security, high uptime, financial market software. Would love any help there. Just the website is cmgx.io, and just hit me up on LinkedIn if anyone wants more information.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Like I said, definitely subscribe. Let me know if you like this video. Scott, Trevor, Mike, thanks so much for hopping on. I really appreciate your time. Scott, it was good catching up with you again, but yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Don.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you guys.
We just see everything we believe. We just see